Why was no one looking at her when the mission brief started? She stood in the back of the Tactical Operations Center, spine pressed against plywood that smelled of mildew and diesel. Staff Sergeant Alina Vance. Call sign, Ghost. The name fit. People looked through her, around her, past her, never directly at her. The air conditioning fought the Philippine humidity and lost. Rain hammered the roof like fists demanding entry. In the Sulu archipelago, rain didn't fall. It materialized from the air itself, thick and suffocating, carrying the smell of rotting vegetation and salt. Lieutenant Commander Miller stood at the front, laser pointer dancing across the projected map. He was a slab of a man, bearded, relaxed in the way only men who killed for a living could afford to be relaxed. His voice carried the casual authority of someone who'd never been told no. MTO predicts the typhoon tracks north, but the outer bands are going to hammer the channel, he said, tapping the screen. Sea state is going to be a 4, maybe 5. Air assets are grounded. No little birds, no Blackhawks. Which means we insert via Mark 5, Chief Red Ali added, shifting tobacco in his lip. Bounce around for 2 hours, vomit our lunch, hit the target, go home. Negative, Miller said, his voice dropping an octave. We're scrubbing the sniper element. Vance's eyes narrowed. She didn't move, but the air around her seemed to tighten. Compress, become something sharp. Miller turned, finally acknowledging her existence, but he didn't look at her face. He looked at her boots, then her rank insignia, then the space above her head, anywhere but her eyes. No offense, Sergeant Vance, but the Mark 5 is at capacity with the assault element. And if we have to swim, which is a non-zero probability in this weather, I can't have anyone dragging. Dragging. The word hung in the air like smoke. Dragging, sir. Vance's voice was soft, melodic, utterly devoid of warmth. It's physics, Vance, Miller said, crossing his arms. You're what? 130 dripping wet. The gear weighs 60. The current in the black gap runs at 4 knots. I'm not risking my guys to fish you out. The room went quiet. The 6 other SEALs suddenly found their boots fascinating. They knew Vance. They knew she could shoot the wings off a fly at 1,000 yards. But they also knew the ocean didn't care about marksmanship. It cared about mass, lung capacity, the brutal mathematics of drowning. I don't need fishing out, Commander, Vance said, stepping forward. And you need eyes. Miller sighed, the sound of a patient teacher explaining basic addition to a slow student. If air is grounded, you have no ISR, no drones, no overwatch, you go in blind. She paused, letting it sink in. You walk into a meat grinder. The target, General Kale, travels with a convoy. Not one boat, 6. We can handle 6 boats, Red grunted. In the dark, Vance challenged, her gaze locking onto Miller's. In a storm, with rain masking their thermal signatures, you need a localized spotter, someone to shut down the engines before they get within RPG range of your assault craft. I can carry the Mk-13. It's compact. I can swim the drag bag. Miller laughed, a short, sharp bark. You ever swim the gap, Vance? No, sir. It's not a pool in Quantico. It's a washing machine filled with sharks and diesel fuel. He shook his head. If the boat breaks, we swim, and you, he shook his head again. You stay here, monitor comms. The door slammed open against the wind. Major Holloway, the intel officer, walked in, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. Change of plans, gentlemen. And lady, Holloway said, dropping a folder on the table. Intercept chatter confirms Kale isn't just moving narcotics. He's moving precursor chemicals, VX grade. The mood shifted, from relaxed arrogance to razor-wire tension. If that convoy reaches open water, they transfer the payload to a freighter and it's gone, Holloway continued. Rules of engagement have shifted. This is no longer capture or kill. This is interdiction. We sink them, all of them. Positive identification is mandatory before engagement to ensure no civilians are used as shields. Miller looked at the map, His jaw worked, grinding through options that all tasted like ash. "Sink 6 boats," he said quietly. "We don't have enough heavy weapons on one Mark V to guarantee that before they scatter." "You need a precision force multiplier," Vance said. She didn't shout, she didn't plead. She simply stated a tactical fact. "You need someone to crack the engine blocks from standoff distance while you close in. I can put .300 Winchester Magnum rounds through those cowlings from 800 meters. You can't do that with M4s bouncing on a wave." Miller stared at the map, then at the storm raging outside the window, and finally at Vance. He looked for fear in her eyes. He found only cold, hard calculation. "5 minutes," Miller said, his voice tight. "You have 5 minutes to gear up. If you're late, we leave. If you fall behind in the water, we cut you loose. Do you copy?" "Solid copy, sir." "And Vance," Miller warned, his finger pointing at her chest, "don't make me write a letter to your mother explaining why you drowned." Vance turned on her heel. "You won't have to write anything, sir. I write my own letters." She walked out into the rain, the heavy drops hitting her like lead shot. She had won the seat on the boat. Now she just had to survive the ocean. But here's what she hadn't told them. Here's what no one knew. The Black Gap had already tried to kill her once, 5 years ago during dive school. She'd been pulled under by a riptide, dragged across coral that shredded her wetsuit, held beneath the surface until her lungs screamed and her vision tunneled to a pinpoint of white light. She survived by refusing to panic, by accepting the water, by becoming part of it. The ocean wasn't her enemy, it was her judge, and she was about to ask for judgment again. What does it feel like when the world tilts 45 degrees and refuses to level out? The Mark V Special Operations craft wasn't designed for comfort. It was a violent marriage of horsepower and Kevlar, built to break things, including the spines of the people riding inside it. As the vessel cleared the breakwater and hit the open chaos of the Sulu Sea, the world went sideways. Vance sat strapped into the shock-mitigating seat near the stern, body tense, anticipating impacts that came like artillery shells. The boat launched off a 12-foot swell, hung in the air, weightless, sickening, then slammed down into the trough with a sound like a sledgehammer hitting a steel drum. Her teeth rattled, her organs shifted, the hull shuddered. "Check gear," Miller's voice crackled over internal comms, barely audible over the roar of twin MTU diesel engines and hammering rain. Vance checked her drag bag for the 10th time, a chaotic bundle of waterproof cordura containing her Mk-13 Mod 7 sniper rifle, ammunition, spotting scope, thermal imager. She'd lashed it to deck webbing with 2 extra carabiners. If the boat rolled, the bag stayed. If the bag went over, she was useless. Opposite her, Red Ali was turning green. He gripped the grab bar with white knuckles, eyes fixed on a point on the floor. Even the elite got seasick, though they'd die before admitting it. Vance felt nausea rise in her throat, sour bile and adrenaline, but she swallowed it down, focused on rhythmic breathing. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. The same technique she used behind the scope. "Skipper, radar is cluttered," the coxswain shouted. "Rain is too heavy, can't distinguish contacts from weather." "Run dark," Miller ordered. "Kill running lights, go passive." The Mark V plunged into deeper darkness. Now the only light came from the tactical glow of instruments and the occasional white flash of lightning illuminating the chaos outside. The waves didn't look like water anymore. They looked like mountains, black, moving, alive. Vance's hand found the SEAL Challenge coin in her pocket. Not hers, her father's. He'd been a Marine reconnaissance operator. Vietnam. He gave it to her the night before she shipped to boot camp. Told her it had kept him breathing through 13 months in country. Told her to give it back when she was done with it. He died 6 months later. Liver cancer. Quiet, undramatic, no firefight, no glory, just cellular betrayal. She never gave the coin back. "Ghost," Miller's voice in her ear, "You good?" "Solid." But she wasn't solid. Not really. She was terrified, not of the mission, not of the shooting. She was terrified of the water, of the moment, and there would be a moment when the boat couldn't take her any further, when she'd have to surrender to the ocean and trust that her body would do what her mind insisted was impossible. Swim 2 miles, with 60 pounds of gear, through a typhoon. Physics said no, physiology said no, common sense screamed no. But there was something in her that didn't listen to no, something stubborn, something broken. Maybe that's what they saw when they called her ghost, not absence, not invisibility, but the part of her that had already died once and refused to stay down. The Mark V hit another swell. This one bigger, meaner. The bow lifted, 40 degrees, 50. For a moment Vance thought they were going to flip. Then gravity remembered its job. The bow crashed down and seawater exploded over the windscreen, flooding the deck. "Bilge pump is maxed," someone shouted. "Keep it together," Miller barked. And then through the storm, a voice on the radio. Panicked, Filipino accent, civilian frequency. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is fishing vessel Santo Niño. We are taking water. Engines are dead. Request immediate." Static swallowed the rest. Miller looked at the GPS, then at the heading. His face went hard. "That's the channel," he said quietly. "That's the Black Gap." Red leaned forward. "You think Kale's convoy?" "I think we just heard someone who got in their way." The temperature in the cabin dropped. Not physically, but the air felt colder, because everyone understood. This wasn't just a smuggling operation. This was a convoy willing to sink civilian vessels to avoid detection, willing to kill fishermen to protect their cargo. Vance's hand tightened on the drag bag. She thought about the VX precursors, about what that poison could do in the wrong hands, about nerve agents that turned lungs into concrete and blood into sludge, about weapons that didn't discriminate between soldiers and children. She thought about her father, about the things he never talked about, the nights he woke up screaming, the way he flinched at loud noises, the way he looked at her sometimes like he was seeing something else, someone else, some other war. He never told her what he did in Vietnam, but he told her this. Sometimes you do a thing not because it's easy or because it's right. You do it because if you don't, something worse happens, and you're the only one in position to stop it. The Mark V slowed. Miller held up a fist, the universal signal for halt. "We're at the rally point," he said. "Insertion point is 2 miles northeast. Current is going to push us west, so we compensate east." He looked at Vance, really looked at her, for the first time that night. "Last chance, Ghost. You can stay on the boat, monitor from offshore, no shame." She met his eyes. "I didn't come here to watch, sir." Miller nodded slowly. "Then welcome to the Gap." He opened the side hatch. Wind screamed into the cabin. Rain hit her face like gravel, and beyond the railing the ocean waited. Black, cold, infinite. And Vance realized something that made her stomach drop. She wasn't afraid of drowning. She was afraid of failing, of being pulled from the water, of proving Miller right. She was afraid of being saved. Have you ever jumped into something knowing you might not come back? The water hit her like a car crash. Cold so absolute it didn't feel like temperature, it felt like violence. Her body seized, every muscle locked. Her lungs refused to expand. The Mark V's engines roared away, and suddenly she was alone in the dark, 60 pounds heavier than she should be, with a drag bag trying to pull her to the bottom. Panic clawed at her throat, the instinct to thrash, to fight, to scream. But she didn't. She forced herself still, forced her mind to override her body. This was just another scope, just another breath. Inhale, hold, exhale. The cold became background noise. Her lungs remembered how to work. Her legs started kicking. The drag bag was supposed to be hydrodynamic, supposed to glide through water, but supposed to didn't account for 12-foot swells and a 4-knot current trying to rip it from her grip. She'd attached it with a tow line, a nylon cord clipped to her assault vest. The cord was rated for 400 pounds, but rated didn't mean comfortable. Every wave yanked the line taut. The cord dug into her collarbone, into her neck, into the soft tissue above her sternum. She tasted copper, blood from where the cord was abrading skin. 2 miles. In training, she'd swum 2 miles in 40 minutes, in a pool with no gear, in perfect conditions. This wasn't perfect conditions. This was hell disguised as water. She forced herself into a rhythm. Kick, pull, breathe, kick, pull, breathe. Don't think about distance, don't think about cold, don't think about the weight, just the next stroke. Then the next, then the next. A swell lifted her. For a moment she could see the distant lights of the Mark V, already half a mile away, moving toward the insertion point. Then the wave dropped her into a trough, and the world became black water and white foam. Her father used to say drowning was quiet. No thrashing, no screaming, just a person who stops moving, stops fighting, slips under. Not today, she thought, not like this. Her watch was waterproof, glowing green in the dark, 15 minutes. She'd been swimming 15 minutes, she should be halfway, but the current was stronger than briefed. She was being pushed west, off course. If she missed the target beach by even a quarter mile, she'd end up in open ocean with no reference point, no way back. Fear tried to surface again. She shoved it down, used it, converted it to fuel. Kick, pull, breathe. Her shoulders burned. Her legs felt like concrete. Her core, usually her strongest asset, was screaming. The cold was winning. She could feel it in her fingers, numbness creeping in, fine motor control failing. Soon she wouldn't be able to work the rifle bolt, wouldn't be able to pull the trigger. Doesn't matter, she told herself. Get to shore first. Worry about shooting later. 25 minutes. She should see the lighthouse. The target island was supposed to have an old derelict lighthouse on the northern point. That was her landmark, her salvation. But she saw nothing, just darkness, just water. Had she missed it, swum past it? Was she already drifting into open ocean? No, don't think like that. Trust the compass, trust the training. She checked her wrist-mounted compass. The luminous dial showed her heading, still northeast, still on track. The lighthouse was there, it had to be there. And then through the rain, a shape, dark, vertical, man-made. The lighthouse. Relief hit her so hard she almost forgot to breathe. She adjusted her heading, angling toward the structure. Her legs were useless now, dead weight. She pulled with her arms alone, each stroke agony, each breath a negotiation. The structure grew closer. She could see the foundation now, a concrete platform built on pylons rising 10 feet above the water. Waves crashed against the supports, exploding into white spray. There was a ladder, rusted, corroded, but still attached. She reached for it, missed. A wave shoved her sideways. She reached again. Her fingers closed around cold metal. She held on, used the last reserves of strength to pull herself up. One rung, another. Her arms shook. Her body wanted to quit, wanted to let go, wanted to slip back into the water and just stop. One more rung. Her foot found purchase. She heaved herself up, then again and again. She collapsed onto the platform, face down, gasping. The rain hammered her back. She wanted to stay there, just lie there, forever. But the watch on her wrist glowed accusingly. 42 minutes. She'd burned 42 minutes on a swim that should have taken 30. The convoy was already moving. The window was shrinking. She forced herself up, unclipped the drag bag. Her hands were so numb she could barely work the carabiners. She pulled out the rifle, the Mk-13 Mod 7, compact, deadly, soaked. Please work, she thought. Please God, let this thing work. She ran the bolt, smooth, no grit. The waterproofing had held. She attached the scope, set up the tripod, pulled out the ammunition. 300 Winchester Magnum rounds in a waterproof mag. She loaded, chambered, breathed. And then she looked through the scope at the black water below. And saw nothing. The storm was too heavy, the rain too dense, visibility was zero. She'd swum 2 miles through hell, and she couldn't see the targets. Her radio crackled. "Ghost, this is Voodoo 1, do you copy?" Miller's voice, she keyed the mic. "Solid copy. What's your status?" She looked at her hands, shaking so hard she could barely hold the weapon, looked at the scope showing nothing but black static. "I'm in position." There was a pause, then, "Can you see the targets?" She should say no, should admit the visibility was impossible, should call off the mission. But something in her, that stubborn, broken thing, wouldn't let her. "Not yet," she said, "but I will." And as if the universe was listening, the rain shifted. Just for a moment, just a crack in the storm. And through that crack she saw lights, 6 of them, moving in formation, half a mile out. The convoy. Her breathing steadied. Her hands stopped shaking. Because this moment right here was what she was built for. Not the swimming, not the suffering, the shooting. And she never missed. Why does clarity only come when everything else is falling apart? She saw them through the scope now. 6 boats moving in loose formation, engines idling low to avoid making signatures. They weren't military vessels. They were civilian fishing boats repurposed. Wooden hulls, fiberglass decking. The kind you'd see in any harbor from Manila to Mindanao. But these weren't carrying fish. They were carrying poison, and men with guns. Through the thermal scope she could see heat blooms, bodies, at least 4 per boat, some standing, some crouched. One was scanning the horizon with binoculars, looking for threats, looking for her. He wouldn't find her. She was cold now, hypothermic. Her body temperature had dropped so low she barely registered on thermal. She was invisible, a ghost. The rangefinder blinked, 823 meters. Long shot, especially in wind, especially in rain, especially with hands that couldn't feel the trigger anymore. But long shots were her specialty. She did the math automatically. Wind at 12 knots gusting to 15, humidity near 100%, temperature drop from barrel to target. She adjusted the scope, dialed in the dope, chambered the round. The first boat was in front, the lead vessel, probably Cale's boat, probably the command element. She could see a figure standing near the helm, taller than the others, broader, wearing a different profile. That was him. That was the target. But she didn't shoot him. Not yet. Because killing Cale didn't sink the boats. And sinking the boats was the mission. She needed to crack the engines, disable them, pin them in the channel so the Mark V could close in and finish the job. She shifted aim, targeting the engine cowling of the nearest boat. The engines on these vessels were simple, diesel inboards, old, probably Chinese knockoffs of Japanese designs. The engine blocks were cast iron, heavy, but not bulletproof. Winchester Magnum could punch through steel plate at this range. Cast iron was nothing. She exhaled, slow, controlled, let her heart rate drop, let the world narrow to the reticle and the target. Squeeze. The rifle bucked. The suppressor muted the report to a dull thump, swallowed instantly by wind and rain. She ran the bolt, ejecting the brass. It clattered on the concrete platform. Through the scope she saw the impact. The cowling sparked, the engine coughed, died. The boat listed immediately, losing power, turning sideways in the current. One down. She shifted to the second boat. Same procedure, same breath, same trigger squeeze. Thump spark, dead engine, 2 down. Now the convoy was reacting. She could see figures moving, pointing, shouting, but they didn't know where the shots were coming from. They were scanning the water, the horizon, looking for a boat, an aircraft, anything. Not looking up, not looking at the lighthouse. Third boat, adjust for wind shift, adjust for the target's movement, exhale. Thump, 3 down. Her radio crackled. Ghost, Voodoo 1, we have eyes on the targets, they're dead in the water, what's your status? 4 engines down, she rasped. Her voice was failing now, her throat raw from seawater and cold. 2 more to go. Copy, be advised, targets are returning fire. They're shooting at shadows. She could see it now. Muzzle flashes from the boats, panicked, undisciplined. They were spraying rounds into the dark, hopping to hit something, anything. One round sparked off the lighthouse support below her. Another whined past, high and wide. She ignored them, lined up the fourth boat. This one was trying to run, engine at full throttle, making wake, harder shot, moving target. She let it, calculated the intercept point, exhaled. Thump, the round hit the engine block, but this time something different happened. The engine didn't just die, it exploded. Oil line rupture. The heat from the engine block ignited the fuel vapor. The back of the boat erupted in orange flame. Men jumped overboard, silhouettes against the fire. 4 down. 2 boats left, and they were scattering now, peeling off in opposite directions, one heading north, one heading south, trying to split her attention. She chose north, because that was the boat with the taller figure, that was Kale. 5th shot, 5th engine, 5th spark dead in the water. The figure Kale was shouting now. She could see him clearly through the scope, grabbing a radio, screaming into it. His boat was drifting, powerless, surrounded by burning wrecks and disabled hulls. 1 boat left, the 6th boat, running south, nearly out of effective range now, 950 meters, wind stronger at that distance, rain heavier. She adjusted, aimed high to account for bullet drop, held for wind. Squeezed. The rifle barked. She watched the trace, a faint line of disturbed air. The round impacted the engine cowling, but it was a glancing hit, not center mass. The engine stuttered, coughed, but kept running. Damn it! She chambered another round. Her hands were shaking again. The cold was winning. Her vision was starting to tunnel. She was running on fumes now, on willpower alone. Exhale, steady, squeeze. Thump, this time center mass. The engine died. The 6th boat wallowed in the current, joining its dead brothers. Voodoo 1 ghost, all engines down. Repeat, all 6 boats disabled. There was a pause, then Miller's voice, different now, quiet, almost reverent. Confirmed ghost, that's 14 for 14. 14. 14 shots, 14 hits, no misses. She looked at the empty magazine well of her rifle, looked at the brass scattered around her feet, 14 casings, glinting dully in the rain. She'd been so focused on the mission she hadn't counted. 14 shots, 14 engines, no second chances, no margin for error. Perfect. And then her body reminded her why perfect had a price. Her legs buckled. She collapsed onto the platform. The rifle clattered beside her. Her core temperature was crashing. Hypothermia wasn't creeping anymore. It was sprinting. She tried to key the radio. Her fingers wouldn't work. Tried to sit up. Her body refused. The rain felt warm now. That was bad. That was the beginning of the end. She could hear her father's voice. You're going to be okay, Alina. Just breathe, just breathe. But breathing was hard now, so hard. She curled into a fetal position, trying to conserve heat, trying to hold on. She activated the IR strobe on her vest, a silent flashing beacon visible only through night vision. It would tell them where she was. If they came, if they could reach her before the cold did. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, just to rest them just for a moment. And in that darkness she heard it, a sound, low, rhythmic, growing louder. The Mark V, coming back, coming for her. She tried to smile, couldn't, her face was frozen. But inside, somewhere deep where the cold couldn't reach, she felt it. I did it, I swam the gap. And I didn't drown. What does respect sound like when it's given by someone who never wanted to give it? The sound of the miniguns was something she'd never forget. A terrifying electric buzz like chainsaws tearing through sheet metal. The twin M134s mounted on the Mark V's rails opened up. Red tracers, so dense they looked like solid laser beams, swept across the water. The nearest smuggling boat disintegrated. Wood, plastic, men, everything erased in a cloud of splinters and mist. She watched it with detached fascination. Through her failing vision, through the hypothermic haze, it looked like fireworks. The Mark V pivoted. The gunners walked fire across the remaining targets. The suppression fire from below ceased instantly. There was no fight left, only cleanup. Then silence. The sudden absence of sound was deafening. The Mark V pulled alongside the lighthouse foundation, engines idling with a throaty rumble. Ghost sound off. The voice was amplified by a hailer, Miller. He sounded frantic. She tried to shout. Her throat was frozen shut. She managed a weak croak. She reached up, tapped the IR strobe, making it blink faster. Below she heard boots hitting the metal ladder. Fast, aggressive climbing. They were coming. She let her head drop back onto the cold grating. She looked up at the rain. It felt warmer now. That was bad. That was the end. A shadow fell over her. Miller vaulted over the railing, weapon up, scanning the platform. He saw the empty brass casing scattered on the deck, saw the tripod, and then he saw her. He dropped his rifle, fell to his knees beside her. "Talk to me, Ghost, talk to me." His hands were warm, burning hot. She flinched. He saw the blood on her face, the gash on her cheek from shrapnel, saw the white waxy pallor of her skin, saw the way her eyes were rolling back in her head. "Medic," Miller screamed down the shaft, his voice cracking. "Get the heaters, get the IVs now." He ripped off his heavy waterproof jacket, wrapped it around her, pulling her tight against his chest armor to share body heat. "You crazy bitch," he whispered, his voice trembling. He looked out over the railing at the carnage in the channel, saw the 14 engines floating in the water, saw the burning remains, looked back at her, at the small, shivering woman who had swum through hell to stack bodies like cordwood. 14, Vance whispered. The word was a slur, barely intelligible. "What?" Miller put his ear to her lips. 14 shots, she breathed, eyes closing. 14 hits. Miller stared at her, looked at the empty magazine well of her rifle. "Yeah," Miller said, his voice thick with an emotion he'd never admit to. "I see them, Ghost, I see them." He scooped her up in his arms, lifting her effortlessly. She weighed nothing, just bone and will. "Let's go home," he said. Vance let the darkness take her. She didn't have to swim anymore. The world returned in fragments. White noise, antiseptic smells. The ceiling was white tile punctuated by harsh fluorescent strips. The sound of the ocean was gone, replaced by the rhythmic hiss-click of an IV pump and distant murmurs in the corridor. She tried to sit up. Her body refused, not paralysis, just heaviness, profound, like gravity had tripled. Her muscles felt tenderized. "Easy, Sergeant." A Navy corpsman appeared in her vision, checking the drip line in her left arm. "You've got severe rhabdomyolysis. Your muscles broke down and flooded your kidneys with protein. We're flushing you out. If you move, you're going to wish you hadn't." She slumped back, touched her right cheek. It was covered in thick gauze. 17 stitches, the corpsman noted. "Going to leave a nasty scar. Tell people you got into a bar fight in Manila. Sounds better than the truth." The truth, she looked at the clock, 1400 hours. She'd been out for 12 hours. The door opened. The air pressure changed. Miller walked in. He looked different without armor, clean fatigues, freshly shaved, but his eyes were red-rimmed and heavy. He held a clipboard in one hand, styrofoam coffee in the other. He pulled up a metal chair and sat down. He didn't speak for a long time, just looked at her, studying her face as if trying to reconcile the woman in the hospital bed with the creature on the lighthouse. "How's the team?" Vance asked, her voice like sandpaper. "Fine," Miller said. "Tex is complaining about paperwork. Red is sleeping." He took a sip of coffee. "We recovered the debris. Payload is confirmed destroyed. General Kale is confirmed KIA. The chemical precursors are at the bottom of the Saibtu passage. Good. The official report, Miller tapped the clipboard, states that the convoy was destroyed by a localized weather event and subsequent mechanical failures. A tragic accident at sea. Vance nodded slowly, and the 14 holes in the engine blocks. Corrosion, Miller said, face deadpan. Salt water is hell on machinery. He set the clipboard down. This was the way of their world. There would be no silver star, no press conference, no parade. The mission was black. It never happened. The swim never happened. You disobeyed a direct safety advisory, Miller said quietly. You left the boat without a tether. You engaged targets without a spotter. You risked compromising the entire operation. Vance met his gaze, didn't flinch. I completed the mission, sir. Miller held her stare for a moment longer, then let out a long breath. His shoulders slumped. The mask of command cracked, just for a second. Yeah, he said softly, you did. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and heavy, placed it on the white sheet next to her hand. It wasn't a medal. It was a challenge coin, heavy brass, battered and worn, the enamel chipped. On one side was the trident of the SEALs. On the other was the unit crest of Team 4, but it wasn't the standard issue coin they gave to VIPs. This one had a jagged scratch across the face, a mark of personal history. That was in my pocket in Fallujah, Miller said, standing up. It was in my pocket in the Arghandab. It's kept me above water for a long time. Vance touched the cold metal with her fingertips. You swam the gap, Vance, Miller said. He walked to the door, his hand resting on the handle. He paused, not looking back. Next time we go out, you ride in the front of the boat. The door clicked shut. Vance lay alone in the silence. She picked up the coin, felt the weight of it. It was heavier than any ribbon they could pin on her chest. It was an admission, an apology, respect. Forged in the only currency that mattered to people like them. Survival. When does the storm inside you finally quiet down? She looked out the window. Beyond the chain-link fence of the base she could see the ocean. The storm had passed. The water was blue, calm, indifferent. It gave no sign of the violence it had swallowed the night before. It hid its secrets well. Vance closed her fist around the coin. She felt the ache in her muscles, the throb of the scar on her face, the cold that still lingered deep in her bones. She thought about Miller's words, you swam the gap. Simple statement, no fanfare, no ceremony, just acknowledgement. And somehow that meant more than any medal ever could. Because the people who understood what it cost to swim the gap, they were the only ones whose opinion mattered. She thought about the 14 shots, 14 engines, no misses. Her whole life people had looked at her and calculated the odds, looked at her frame, her size, her gender, and decided she wasn't enough, wasn't strong enough, fast enough, tough enough. They were wrong, not because she proved them wrong through anger or aggression, but because she simply did the work, without theatrics, without ego. She showed up, did the job, went home. That's what ghosts do. They don't announce themselves. They don't demand recognition. They just appear when needed, do what needs doing, disappear when it's done. Her father used to say, the loudest person in the room is usually compensating for something. The quiet ones, they're the ones you watch out for. He'd been a quiet one, earned a Bronze Star with valor in Vietnam, never wore it, never talked about it. She found it after he died in a shoebox in his closet buried under old tax returns, like it didn't matter, like it was just another piece of paper. But it mattered, not because of the medal, because of what he did to earn it, and he didn't need anyone to tell him it mattered. He knew. Just like she knew now. The door opened again. A different figure this time, Chief Red Ali. He walked in slowly, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable in the hospital setting. He stood at the foot of her bed, cleared his throat. Heard you were awake, he said. I am. Good because. He pulled something out of his pocket, a flask, battered steel. He unscrewed the cap, poured a small amount into the plastic water cup on her bedside table. "This is Pappy Van Winkle, 23-year bourbon, costs more than my truck." He held the cup out. She took it with shaking hands. "Why?" she asked. "Because," Red said quietly, "in 30 years of doing this job I've never seen anyone do what you did, and I needed you to know that." He paused. "We give each other shit, that's the culture, but what you did out there, that was—" he struggled for the word. "That was biblical, Ghost, that was Old Testament." She took a sip. The bourbon burned her throat. It felt good, felt real. Red nodded, satisfied, turned to leave, then stopped. "Miller's not great with feelings, but he meant what he said. Front of the boat, that's not a courtesy, that's an honor." He left. Vance finished the bourbon, let the warmth spread through her chest. She looked at the challenge coin again, ran her thumb over the scratched surface. She thought about all the times she'd been dismissed, overlooked, told she didn't belong, every slight, every condescending comment, every room she walked into where the conversation stopped because they didn't know what to do with her. She could be angry about it, could carry it like a weight, could use it as fuel for bitterness. Or she could do what she'd always done. Let it go, move forward, keep working. Because that's the thing about being underestimated. It's exhausting to correct everyone, exhausting to prove yourself over and over. At some point, you stop trying to convince people. You just do the work. And the ones who matter, the ones worth respecting, they figure it out eventually. The ones who don't, they stay behind, still talking, still doubting while you keep moving forward. The corpsman came back in. "Sergeant, you have another visitor." Vance looked up. A young Marine private stood in the doorway. 19, maybe 20, female. She looked nervous. "I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am," the private said. I heard what you did, and I wanted to say," she swallowed hard. "I wanted to say thank you." Vance frowned. "For what?" "I'm a mortar woman. I'm the only female in my platoon, and she looked down. "They don't think I can carry the tubes, don't think I can keep up on patrol. They're trying to transfer me to admin." "Can you carry the tubes?" Vance asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Can you keep up on patrol?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then tell them to get fucked." The words came out flat, factual. "Do the job, let your work speak. Eventually they'll shut up, and if they don't, that's their problem, not yours." The private nodded slowly. "Thank you, ma'am." She lingered for a moment, then left. Vance leaned back against the pillow. She hadn't asked to be a symbol, hadn't wanted to be anyone's inspiration. She just wanted to do her job, but she understood now, whether she liked it or not, that her actions had weight beyond the mission. They mattered to people like that private, people trying to prove they belonged. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that was part of the job too. She looked out the window again. The ocean was still there, still calm, still hiding its violence beneath a placid surface. She smiled, a small tight movement of her lips. She was the ghost in the machine, the wake that vanished before it hit the shore. And she was ready for the next storm. Because here's what she'd learned out there in the black water, surrounded by cold and doubt and physics that said she should have drowned. Dignity doesn't argue. It doesn't plead its case. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply does what needs to be done. And when the work is finished, it walks away quietly, carrying nothing but the knowledge that it was enough. She'd swum the gap, not because she wanted to prove Miller wrong, not because she wanted glory or medals or recognition. She swam it because someone had to, because the mission required it, because saying "I can't" wasn't in her vocabulary. And when you strip away all the noise, all the doubt, all the disbelief, all the assumptions, that's what it comes down to. Can you do the job, yes or no? She could, she did. And that, in the end, was the only answer that mattered. Vance closed her eyes, not to sleep, just to rest, the kind of rest you earn, The kind that comes after you've given everything and found out there was more to give than you knew. Outside, the ocean continued its ancient rhythm, pushing, pulling, testing everyone who dared enter its domain. But today it had lost. Today it had been forced to admit that some people, some small, stubborn, unbreakable people, couldn't be drowned. Not by water, not by doubt, not by anything. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.